Antonio Fada is mainly a researcher for personal interest. After graduating in religious studies, he spent several years in different countries in Eastern Europe, working for different corporations in support and language data processing roles. He achieved LBC primary certification in 2020, and since then, whenever he's free from his work as a learning specialist, he dedicates most of his time to study and independent research on different areas in philosophy. Today, he's presenting on his essay, Critical Thinking and Value Investigation as Means of Defense Against Cognitive Warfare. How can philosophical practice give its contribution? Antonio?
Thank you. Okay. I will share the screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Do you? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So let's start first of all. I mean about the idea of warfare in general. If you take any military treatise, you will see that there are 6 main pillars of warfare. So there are air, land, water, space, cyberspace, and the last one that was added was the human mind. So if we go to the NATO website, we find this definition about cognitive warfare. We can define cognitive warfare as military domain of operations that aim to affect the attitudes and behavior of individual groups and populations by influencing or disrupting directly their cognitive abilities. These are operations designed specially to modify perception of reality and shaping specific ways of human cognition through the exploitation of some weak spot of our cognition processes. One may ask what for? And first of all, we'd say, this is of course like to shape a participative propaganda. So not to have just people passively bombarded with propaganda message, but having people that will proactively spread around manipulative message and bring to the hoped result from the propaganda mission itself. And one could say, yeah, isn't it just a tech revamp of old school propaganda? Well, disinformation and psychological tricks have been around since the dawn of warfare on Earth. However, these things, they have different strategies and goals. So that's why it's important to draw a distinction between cognitive warfare, information warfare, and psyops. So information warfare is just simply providing to an opponent misleading information, trusting that their cognitive capabilities they are unaltered, so they will make by mistake simply because they don't have the right means to ascertain the situation. PsyOps, on the contrary, the contract for psychological operations, were military operations that aim to steer the irrational behavior. One example is Operation Wandering Souls during the Vietnam War, which simply consisted on broadcasting some distorted human voices on the opponent camp, exploiting the superstition that were the ghosts of the dead people coming to haunt them. Cognitive warfare, on the other side, has a different goal. So the goal is to hinder and reduce cognitive capabilities of groups and individuals. And this is usually instrumental so that information warfare psyops can be more effective. We'll have a quick look at the main point of any cognitive warfare operation, but we'll focus more on the tools because this is what is relevant for us. So, if you would have to launch, we would say, a cognitive warfare operation, the first thing to know is that these are dual strategies. So there is an immediately actionable goal, but this one is just instrumental in order to reach a hidden goal, so a covert one. So the actionable goal, the low-hanging fruit, is to create, steer, and amplify polarization of the public opinion generate feelings of uncertainty and instability, and fuel all these things through polarization and radicalization. This is usually done through enhanced use of echo chambers. I suppose that many of you will be familiar with the concept of echo chambers, but it's simply the fact that if I'm inserted in a certain mean, like in a certain place, and all I receive around are feedback confirming already my opinion, these will tend to radicalize already the opinion that I have, whether if it's right or wrong. So this is the actionable goal of any cognitive warfare campaign. At the same time, this is just instrumental to reach the hidden goal, which is usually drive or political support towards certain factions, drive distrust, lead further polarization to exploit other weaknesses in social economic structures. So they can be different things. There are different steps, of course, according to every cognitive warfare campaign, but there are some key moments common to everyone. A first study is the one of preliminary studies. So we need to do a reconstruction of every historical, political, social, economic events, figures, and ideas, not to find the truth, but just to find which are the weak links that can be suitable to reopen old wounds, and as well how to do it in order to maximize the effect. A second phase would be the idea of blurring and reshaping. So any detail that is conflicting, it needs to be reshaped so that it can be corroborating the third step, which are the idea of creating a master narrative, and in order to enrich this one, create a rich thread of coherent sub-narratives that somehow will melt. And after these, the idea is to craft a release plan. So it's important to understand how the information and the narratives will be released, in which format, in which means, and through which time frame. Then many campaigns, they may have some design failure mode analysis. So these are corrective strategies that they are prevented in advance in order to understand how to drive anyway the result on port even against possible reaction. So an example could be whenever cognitive warfare operation release, I mean some fake news or things like this, there will always be, of course, some fact checkers and debunkers. But at the same time, maximizing the echo chambers will ensure that people will be insensitive the most for any kind of information that will come from debunkers. And if we drive a bit further, another thing which is a crucial factor are the means of deployment. I don't know if you remember the old aphorism of Nietzsche. The longer you the more you stare at the abyss will stare back at you. So this goes in the same way. We use technology to communicate and to do other things, but at the same time, technology also shapes our ability or our loss of ability to perform certain tasks. And there are several principles related to the means of deployment as well, but there are two main directives that can be seen at a micro level, at a macro level. The first of all, it's in the word of today, rule from viral contents. Quantity stands for quality in many cases. So viral contents that made as such in order to exploit confirmation biases in individual or big groups of masses. So if someone is surrounded from people thinking something, they will think, yeah, maybe I'm the only stupid, and they're right. And the second point is that reality is what you see. If we look around with actual capabilities, there are already some generative AI tools that are able to generate quite convincing deepfakes. And what is worse is that they're able, allow many people to do it with little to no cost, and also without any technical knowledge on multimedia production. So this is something that is escalating any operation of cognitive warfare to a totally another level. However, the core tool of any cognitive warfare operation are the tools. So communicative and psychological weak spots on human cognition. These remain unaltered in order to craft the narrative that will drive the results. So I added here a small list, and I added also some reference to all the applicable fallacies of LBT. I won't stop on these explicitly, but I'm sure that you will start to resonate. I mean, you will start to do some connection. The first one is what I named the reversed mental empty fort. A little bit of explanation. The empty fort ruse is a military stratagem that is listed in the book, The 36 Stratagems. The idea is this: if I am outnumbered against an opponent, what I can do, I can take one of my locations, fill it with activities to convey to the enemy the impression that this will be full of traps and ambushes. So even if I am outnumbered, I'm convincing him to retreat. If we transfer this in communication, an empty fort is what we would call an empty slogan. So it's a conceptual construction that appears to be solid, even if it's not. And in this case, it's mental because it doesn't involve physical location. And it's reversed because the goal of the Chinese strategy was to keep the opponent distant, not to attack. In this case, instead, we want to attract the audience to feel that it's something that has a meaning, is full, while in fact it is not. And one may say, why to adopt such a strategy? The main purpose is to generate beforehand a consensus on an empty concept. At a later stage, then, that empty concept will be overlapped to a favorable target, which can be a political person, an institution, an ideology. So this will shift the previously generated consensus to the new one. And nothing new under the sun. This is a strategy that has some historical precedents. But the idea is that today's social media world and the hashtags and all makes it really, really more efficient. A second strategy, always from the 36 stratagems, is what is literally translated as steal a corpse to revive the spirit. If you have a certain idea to propose, use an institution, a technology, or an ideology from the past. So, dig the corpse out and use it again. Present any new action that you're proposing as a revival or a continuation of it. And here it's important to blur and reshape, as we say before. Why? Because this will lend justification and authority. The narrative will have a strong points on proposing any activity as a legitimate restoration of a previous order that nonetheless was lost in time due to progressive moral and social decay. A third strategy, which again resonates a lot with LBT, but it's a super interesting variation to our modern time, is the calculated use of information overload and oversimplification. Nowadays, we receive information at really absurd level from every place, usually enhanced through multimedia. And these, according to many studies that have been done, I mean, has caused a drop of attention span to an all-time record. Cognitive warfare operation, they do a calculated induction of information overload for a specific goal. They try to cause disconnection from the audience. So whenever something seems overly complicated, people simply disconnect it and they don't pay attention anymore. And after this disconnection is done, then they come with the oversimplification. The easy narrative will be the only one that will be affordable to grasp. And in this case, will be the only one that people will think that it's reliable and right. There is also a sort of weird distortion of Occam's razor, because it was the idea that if you have two ways to arrive to a result, the one with less steps is preferable. In this case, instead, many people they say the one that has less steps is preferable anyway, without considering the results. So this is again another core tool of any cognitive warfare strategy. Another really important point is what we may call apophenia, using the term of psychiatrist Klaus Conrad. So apophenia is whenever we see unmotivated connections in things, And we accompany this one with a feeling that they have a really huge importance, even if they're not. This is kind of the perversion of a natural, we could say, mechanism, because it's the first thing that we do if we do not understand the causes of something, we try to integrate it through hypotheses and assumptions. However, whenever there isn't a limit, the point is that these connections down there filter and rewire completely our semantic networks. And these are used in cognitive warfare to plant the seeds of delusion and negation against any possible alternatives. So here we have the core mechanism of conspiracy theory narratives, any attempt to enhance extremism, and of course, fueling this more through echo chambers and polarization. We have then another great classic in all its declinations. So, Strawman arguments. You know, the informal fallacy of trying to refuting an argument by putting another one that is not really related to this. So, I mean, it doesn't have the right relevance to provide a valid refutation. And then we have many, many declinations. So we starting from distorting to the extreme, decontextualization, false defense, using borderline case with high emotional profile, distorting proportionally the occurrences of certain things. So both sidesism, cherry picking. Then we got other things like false relevance, not grounded inferences, and then the great classic, it's maybe the refutation ad hominem. So we're criticizing a person instead of attacking an argument to imply that the argument was fault. Another super important mechanism of cognitive warfare operation is the idea to exploit outcome biases. So, an outcome bias is the tendency to reread the past through the lens of a knowledge that instead was acquired afterwards. So, basically, we are rewriting our past. And in cognitive warfare, this is extremely dangerous because it can work in a self-feeding loop. So starting from a narrative of the past that was rewritten factiously, this generates apophenia on possible future contingencies. So, I mean, we start to see analogies from the crafted narrative of the past to possible future. We craft the narrative of the future, and this one will overwrite at this time like the narrative of the past, reinforced through confirmation bias. This is the key gate, we would say, the key that opens the gate of any historical denialism and many other fallacies. For example, the post hoc, like believing that something is an effect of something else just because it happened later in time. Another piece that it's mandatory, like in every cognitive warfare operation, is the exploitation of memory biases. This because in order to blurry and reshape the gate to do these are the memory biases. So we start from all the declinations like of auto-production effect, so building false memories, source amnesia, so forgetting where we hear or we saw something, illusion of frequency, so once we see something, this appears everywhere, and then idealization of the past or isolation bias. So if a narrative of cognitive warfare would like you to remember more a certain topic, it will present it, for example, isolated from a lower stream. This will mean that you will have more probability to remember that specific topic that it's isolated than not everyone else who is in the flow. Another point, it's the idea of exploiting multimedia to induce highly emotional effects. So, how does this work? Nowadays, multimedia, they're, we could say, in almost all the information that we acquire sounds, video, images, all the other things. And in many cases, like for learning paths, this can be used to a really good purpose and improve the learning process. However, whenever they're used in the frame of cognitive warfare, all these tools, they have just one goal, creating the highest possible emotional involvement so that these will tend to bypass any critical reflection on proposed contents. especially exploiting really violent emotions like outrage or feelings like this. But of course, this is a key tool, but usually it's instrumental in the deployment of many other tools. So whatever you want to induce, overload and oversimplify, apophenia, other things, multimedia will grant that there is an enhancement and especially that the message will reach faster. And last but not least, we would say of these tricks, we could say that we have a evaluative language. I mean, I put here a quote of Professor Cohen that explained it brilliantly. And the point is always this one. I mean, as we all know, evaluative language tends to create basically a connection in a semantic network. And once this is done, it is taken for granted without further review. So this is usually hiding a hidden premise that may hide a fallacy, and it's led then in chains of reasoning to further extremes. So this is usually a passepartout for all the fallacies, actually. Having said this, how can we react as a society? We have basically two ways. So we can do it in a reactive way when action is already in motion, or proactively. We can try to strengthen the defenses before any real damage happens. In the reactive way, we can reassume it just with a paradox of tolerance explained from Popper. So a tolerant society reserves itself the right to be intolerant with the intolerant. Because if we grant unlimited tolerance also to the intolerant, they will gain the upper end and they will swipe away tolerance from society. So it's the idea of repression. But again, even these, it's a really extreme solution. So should we have to wait to these? No. The idea is that there can be proactive solutions, actually. Sure, we cannot eliminate fallacies, we cannot eliminate cognitive biases, but at the same time, what we can do? We can raise awareness, we can understand what they mean, their effects, and their related trigger, so that maybe we can be less sensible to manipulations of cognitive warfare. And if we try to shift, I mean, cognitive warfare goals. So what are the goals instead of any counteractions? The primary goals are to weaken and debunk any factious narratives, raise awareness about the biases and fallacies that are the gateway of any manipulation attempt, and especially promote a healthy dialogue praxis, because dialogue is the only thing that will help to diffuse any effect of isolation, radicalization, echo chambers, because this is a sequence. And we can see that the most effective tools for these fall within philosophy domain. Philosophy domain has the best tools for critical thinking, for ethic exploration and methodologies of value research in moral, a theory of argumentation, and theory of practice, of dialogue. And there are many approaches. Some may be deeper involved in the specific things of language, and they could give more fine-grained results. But here again, we have a huge drawback. The more technical will be the approach, the more will appear hostile to the general audience. So in this sense, LBT seems a great fit due to the fact that it has a really intuitive structure. It has a huge focus on the practice, but also symmetry between fallacies and values. So once we identify the fallacies, we can easily shift to the corrective part and convert any fallacy in a virtue. As we saw, one of the core points of cognitive warfare is the idea to try to bypass any critical thinking part. So they will try to steer to some emotions that can be so intense that they will usually give to the people the idea that they're not reasoning. It's not something to reason. This is something that's granted because the emotion is too strong. So the formula emotion equal object plus rating in LBT is intuitive and is scalable at a different level. And this may allow us to identify repressed premises of the reasoning, of the emotional one, and also, of course, like to correct the behavioral one. There are just two drawbacks, actually. So one is the complex narratives of cognitive warfare may require longer series of nested syllogism. Reasoning is not really simple in this case. And the second one is the narratives can be refuted only with additional longer research on socioeconomic, historical, and political background. It should be said, moreover, that if we attend to the deontological code of the association, any kind of activity impacting the personal belief of the people should not be allowed, because this would be anyway something violating their sphere. So here again, there is a really thin line that from the practical side can be a bit difficult to respect. And the second side, besides identifying fallacies, is the use LBT to explore as maximum any activity of value research. Because moral values are the compasses that we use to navigate the world. They're the one that gives us a specific direction. So any semantic network that we build, it has somehow a contribution towards a teleological inspiration. So we see the word because we think that there is an orientation of value and the mean that needs to be reached. So in this case, whatever activity can be done through LBT to help people, empower them to investigate critically and defining, shaping, and adopting moral values that they are compatible with the goals of an open, participative, and democratic society, this is still the best mean of defense that we have against cognitive warfare. Because whenever people have this moral compass, they will keep their critical thought always on guard against any attempt of manipulation. Thank you. And now shoot your bullets, please.
All right, we have questions until 3:15. Anyone? There's a lot there.
I'd like to see a copy of your paper after the
The
conference.
presentation, or yeah, sure, I can send it, no problem.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, Antonio, how you, or do you see a connection between what you're saying and the idea of P44, P4C rather, using the method, that was introduced today, with LBT. What's your?
That's sorry, a great question, first of all, and I thought about it before. When I've seen the presentation of Christina, I thought about it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this has some implications related, because indeed it has. Again, it's something that the earliest all the skills are cultivated, the strongest they can become later. So yes, I think that honestly this should be something that it's not easy to explain, because several concepts of communications that can be quite complicated. However, any attempt or any possibility to make it more affordable and to integrate them in learning programs from children onwards, this would help, of course, like to build more strong and resilient people against cognitive warfare. So the more we work with the children, as for everything, the more we work with the children, the better adults we have when they will be grown up.
Thank you. Yeah. I agree with
you.
that. I think you're right. I think children are, but naturally they're more open. I mean, it's subsequently, that their minds get closed up with the biases of culture and enculturation and so forth. Children, I think, are naturally inquisitive and open, to evidence. And keeping that spirit alive, is probably an important aspect of it. What do you think?
Absolutely. Also because, I mean, as you may have seen, I mean, many of these devices of manipulative communication that I show, they're strictly related to many fallacies, for example, like on NBT, and many of these are stereotypes. So that's the point. I mean, children usually they are a bit resilient to stereotypes at the beginning because for them, I mean, whatever we take for granted that it's kind of something printed on our mind from society, for them is not. For them, any possibility it's open. So from this point of view, using that period where still stereotypes are not formal, they are not imposed on them, it can be crucial. It can lead to a radical transformation. Totally.
One of the things I recall years ago talking to Matt Lipman, who started P4C, and we had a discussion, a roundtable at the United Nations in Washington on it, and one of the conclusions that we as a task force came up with was that this needs to start. The critical thinking needs to start in children. But one of the um, barriers is that when children they go to school, but then they go home, and they go back into their culture, and they, then the information warfare and the enculturation of stereotypes and so forth at home begins. So
Absolutely.
this is a really difficult question, I know, but do you have any idea how to break that cycle?
It is a tough question indeed. The point, yes, it's the even if we can ensure that, for example, from a certain point, like e- even in the ideal world, if we would have like a school totally able to do all this thing in the best way, still it would be everything that it's done on one side, it can be undone from another if there is something that is passed. I mean, conflicting information. Honestly, even if my answer may sound a bit naive, I think that is the strength of the argument that should count. So if you teach like to children that you shouldn't leave anyone excluded whenever they're playing an activity, and whenever they're at school and they're playing any activity, everyone is included, even if they come back home and their parents they say, yeah, but this one you should go to, that one should be excluded, or
Mhm.
other things like this, children they will still have like a personal experience to refer to say, hey,
Mhm.
but I felt okay when everyone was included, while I
Mhm.
felt bad, for example, if some people were not included. So in this case, the strength of an argument, especially if it can be backed from an experience, I think that this could lead the most durable impression.
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. And I suppose that the more generations that consistently grow up with training in their thinking skills will ultimately create a different parent, a parent-child relationship.
Breaking the
Yeah, breaking the cycle.
That's the hope.
But
Really.
it's a hope, and for I don't know, 40 years I've been waiting for that to happen. Uh,
But
and
it will.
it
We'll
will.
never have to lose the hope.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, really.
Okay, can I, Antonio, can I ask something or
Sure.
comment or whatever? Because thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed it. I mean,
Thank you.
given the context now, even more so. So I was just going to ask you, what about, because it's now, there is a lot of talk about it. What about, this thing called testing the loyalty? Testing the loyalty by making them accept the loyalty of followers of discourse providers, whoever, making them accept absurd or false statements. This thing which is called the big lie strategy, or loyalty signaling through cognitive dissonance. And there are just to go just a little bit into some details about what that is. The big lie is a falsehood so outrageous that people assume it must be true because no one would dare to fabricate something so extreme. Like maybe you remember this, the election was rigged and I actually won by a landslide. I'm not giving you who said that, but it's kind of obvious. So it could be an example of testing the loyalty, or yeah. So loyalty signaling, when a leader makes followers publicly also affirm ridiculous claims, it's another way of testing their loyalty and submission. And you have things on Canon website and in places like that, or Putin's war narrative. Ukraine is ruled by Nazis who need to be eradicated. So the effect would be that it creates in-group solidarity by filtering out most those unwilling to accept irrational beliefs. They are filtered out, those who don't believe these things. So how can we fight? So I can continue for a long time with these things. How can we fight with common sense and logic against this? Because this is taking people by storm. I mean, we saw this in Nazi Germany happening, so it's not news, but it's happening again.
Right.
So do we have enough means to actually fight this? Do we have to, if we wait another 40 years, like Elliot was saying here, maybe there is no time.
I first of all thank you for the comment, for all the thing, because yes, this is extremely relevant. What I would say is we are in an extreme disadvantage. That's the point. I mean, structures of critical thinking, of good dialogue, of practice of dialogue, and all these things, which in my point of view would be the only one that would be able to diffuse a bit the tension in these. We are in a huge disadvantage in terms of time. This doesn't mean that we should renounce to try to put up any kind of
course
defense.
not.
Because
No.
if we do, if we say it's already too late, things will go anyway, just worse and worse and worse. The point is that, as I was mentioning in the slide, the only alternative, I mean, to any kind of possible defense would be repression. So here we're creating a really precedent thing, and it's something that you may see even in the history of many countries, where in order to escape from a dictator like of a certain faction, I mean, people just shifted to another extreme, going like from the frying pan to the fire directly. So this is something that repression can be just a last resort, and it won't be solving the main problem, which is why people are susceptible to these, why people, they don't have the means to understand which are manipulative means or not, which of course becoming more subtle and subtle. My point of view, I had a slide which I cut down for reasons of time, and it was the point that the first thing to understand is that cognitive warfare is a multidisciplinary approach. So we range from gnosiology to psychology, history, social sciences, politics, all these things. There are relevant factors in the construction of every narrative from all this point of view. So this needs to be a counter-war fight on 360 degrees. It cannot be just a single solution. Philosophy can give a huge support, but this must come from all the other parts as well. So again, there isn't an easy solution, but the most recommendable thing it's to do a 360-degree study, including all the things that could be weak spots, and try to address them one by one. Because cognitive warfare strategies, they are doing the same. They are trying to exploit different weak links on every kind of possible fields.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, no one wants to, give up without a fight at least. So that's
Indeed.
for sure. But thank you for this, for bringing in the technological side of it, because that's very useful, and it's necessary, because this is the technology is the carrier and the multiplier of the messages, which is not what traditionally people were probably better equipped to resist, but now when you
Yeah.
are under these hybrid attacks, then you indeed 360 degrees is, even that is an understatement, because if you think of a spheric figure, then you'll have even
Yeah.
more. Yeah, we have the three-dimensional danger coming from all sides. So thanks very much. Yeah,
That's
I'd
about it.
like to see
Thank you.
I'd like to see it turn into an article. So
Yep. If that would be the opportunity, I mean, I would be really glad to write it. Seriously.
thanks.
Thank you.
I also want to give you feedback that I really like the presentation. It highlights very important and hurting topics from our day and also our future, which I cannot even imagine. It's harder and harder to be able to somehow to see what's right and wrong, what's fake, what's not fake. And skepticism can be skepticism and not trusting and lack of trust are things that I see as a tendency to grow in the society. And with children, I tried I tried some debates regarding these topics, just to introduce and to highlight the importance of digging a little bit more, and of putting some effort in, because what you have said, that overly complicated things, they start to be not only children but even us, because we have a lot of things to do, we disconnect, and then we prefer the simplified version of what is delivered. But the simplified version is, if it's not reliable and right, we might fall in a trap. And how can we either we become more more available to invest effort, or how do we find this, how do we identify these traps, how are we able to jump over these quick solution traps? Maybe you have some ideas here.
It is, first of all, thank you for the question. It is great, and it is super relevant. It reattaches also to what Professor Cohen was saying before. So how would you relate it to the philosophy for children and the activity? The point is whether we like it or not, we live in a complex reality. So there are so many tasks and things that we need to do in order to perform every action in the world. And all these things, they start since from when we're children. The important part related for the children would be to try to give an education that will try to incorporate in these the less amount possible of fallacies. So it doesn't mean that we need to renounce or it doesn't mean that we need to explain all the complexities to the children. They won't get it, and it's not fair. They need to have time for other things as well than just to. But at the same time, we need to try to from the basics. Like, it's the thing of the fractals. Everything is composed by smaller units that then they're added up, and they're creating things more complex. The more we try to get things right when we're explaining simple things, the more we're having possibilities that when they will add up simple things to grow more complex ones, they will have less fallacies possible in the mechanism. Of course, it's not possible to have a 0%. I mean, that's not but it's an attempt we have to try. So, I mean, not giving all the complexity to the children, but try to make even the simpler things right.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Is there time for one more comment?
I would say yes, mainly because I don't see Sean Douglas on the screen, who's our next presenter. So either way, go ahead.
Thank you. I was left with this very important question on how to sustain children, and not only children, into continuing to develop their critical thinking. And this crazy idea came up, which is called defiance, which is something that we people naturally do. When we don't like something, we want to defy it. And children are especially defiant. So I was thinking, how about joining children in their defiance? And rather than calling it wrong or putting them in their place, we say, that's great. It's called problematization. You're raising issues here. Let's help you do it better. Better meaning with skill, with good cause for which you're disrupting, and so forth, so that they get enthusiastic about doing it and positive about doing it, whether in the family, with friends, or at school, and learn to think about how to do it better.
Indeed. I mean, from my point of view, especially with children, I mean, it's something that would work way, I mean, great, because it would give them the ability to understand that even complex things, they can break it up and they can be rebuilt in a different way. That's the point. So the main point is that many adults, for the implication of several things in their life, they don't have the courage or they don't want to take the risk to do it in many cases, because this would mean like to renounce to certain kind of things, like certain stability, certain other things. So, you know, you have certain priorities. So the main difficulty in this case is like, from my point of view, for the future, we have the hope. We have still a bit of time to make things right. The main problem and the most difficult part will be to try to change the models of thinking of people that they have already some things consolidated. And paradoxically, the only thing that is able to change in them now, and we see it, is the use of technology. But it's changing it in many ways, like for the bad side, not for the good one. Many people are losing ability like to write by hand. They're losing ability to do calculations. They're losing basic abilities or skills in life, because the more they're technologically assisted, the more they're not using it. If Lamarck was wrong, we would say from the genetical point of view, he was right, I mean, on the idea of the mental skills. Here is really something that we don't use. It gets atrophied and we lose it. So the main challenge now is with the adults, from my point of view. With the children's, it can be
Yeah.
possible if we acknowledge the error to try to shift the things.
Maybe it's worth considering this idea of defiance even in adults. I notice around me that adults are defiant too. I mean, everybody complains, oh, the system, it doesn't work. We don't, those and those people are to blame for whatnot. So it's a kind of a revolt, let's say, but it's badly used. But if instead of telling these people, don't be an extremist, are you crazy? Look at what you're doing, which they would defend against, maybe joining in their defiance and improving it, you know, providing information, teaching to use data, I don't know, kind of
Would be, no, whatever kind of dialogue can be built, it will surely lead, I mean, to diffuse the effect that I was mentioning of echo chambers and polarization. So it's the idea to try to revert radicalization, which is the
right.
better way to do it. Dialogue. I remember, I mean, an old quote from it was from Kierkegaard and the concept of anguish, and it was says like, what is the demoniac is it's the isolation, because I mean, it was kind of imagining the devil just isolated, turning around and twisting himself and overthinking about this, and that was demoniac because he couldn't have any feedback or any opening that would allow him like to change his view. It was just constantly closed in itself. So yeah, the main problem is the echo chambers nowadays, they're amplified from social media, from the other technologies, so it's extremely difficult. I mean, you may
And
have seen in many cases people that they're trying to do a proactive work of debunking to give critical thinking tool and other things. It's simply they're doing a wonderful job, It's simply that they don't arrive to the people who would need it the most because they don't listen it neither.
Pity, huh?
Unfortunately, yes, it's paradoxical, but it's like this.
I wanted to end on some hope.
Well, I mean, I
I
mean,
couldn't
on
finish today,
everything there is always hope. I mean, honestly, I mean, I think that things won't get lost. I mean, it's that there will be still someone, I mean, able to encourage a bit and even if I mean, even if there are a small amount of people, if they really believe that, if they are the change that they want to see in the world, Gandhi style, I think that there is always hope.
And then
That's my
everything ends, maybe such periods in history, they end as well. So for a while, we need to hang in there, maybe.
Absolutely. This is as well. I mean, we cannot really say how things will be. We can just try to do the best.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Antonio.
Thank you. Thank you. I will try to share it as well. I mean, so for those who ask me, so that I can send it. And
Okay, very good. Thank you.
thank you.
Excuse me.